Welcome. And I am going to let Leo start us off and tell us his career story.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So, summary, I guess I'm from California boy. Kind of had no real idea what I wanted out of a career going into college. I'm the first to go to college in my family. My goal was just to go and see if I could make it through 1 year. So that was kind of my mindset going into college. I was successful the first few years, and I decided to kind of at that point set some goals. And through mentorship and going to events like this, I came to the conclusion that research was something that I wanted to dedicate myself to, at least for the first few years of my 20s, and see if I liked it. I ended up participating in a research experience for in the summertime for undergrads. I really enjoyed that, and that's kind of what catalyzed my decision to go to grad school and get a PhD. I met people from the University of Maryland at a conference my last year in college, and they advised that and encouraged me to apply to the bioengineering program. So I did that. Loved the people that I met. I then met Jim at the welcome. So Jim's a few years older than me in the program, and so I met him during my visit. I loved the atmosphere at the University of Maryland, and especially in the bioengineering department. So I went there. I just graduated in 2019. My background was in material science and polymers. And towards the end of my PhD, my thought was I want a postdoc and learn some more things, basically. And through networking, I was offered a postdoc that was at NIST, the National Institute Standards of Technology, here in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And it was in conjunction with the American Dental Association. So it was kind of a unique postdoc experience because I was working for a nonprofit organization doing like a hybrid industry academic, working on research projects that were kind of like, and also in a government facility. So it was this kind of weird hybrid thing, mostly focusing on dental materials. Then the pandemic hit and shut down my capabilities to do a lot of things. And then recruiters started reaching out to me. And that's kind of how I decided, hey, this is a good time to jump ship and end my postdoc. Much shorter than I thought it was going to be. And eventually I ended up with a good opportunity, which is where I currently am at Senseonics Incorporated here in Germantown, Maryland, where I am using all of the polymer expertise that I gained during my postdoc and also grad school, and I'm helping design continuous glucose monitors. So these are monitors that are implanted in the body for over 90 days, used for diabetic patients. I think hopefully that summarizes everything.
Great, thank you. Since you already mentioned Jim, I'm going to let him go next and tell us his story.
All right, well, thanks. My name is Jim Andorko. I grew up right outside of Philadelphia, actually in New Jersey. So I've kind of been an East Coast kid the entire time. I had a little bit different path than Leo. I started my undergraduate at Drexel University and got into research my freshman year and basically never looked back. I had been in a research lab from summer of my freshman year until about 20 minutes ago. I've loved every moment of it, but I've shifted a number of different times of what that research looked like, what it entailed, and what the projects were. When I was an undergrad, I did a combined bachelor's and master's degree at Drexel University studying drug delivery. So I did polymer chemistry and drug delivery, and thought that was the way I was going to go for all of eternity. I looked around for graduate school and ultimately met Chris Jewell at the University of Maryland, and he was doing biomaterials and vaccine delivery and vaccine design. And my idea of drug delivery completely went out the window. So I shifted over to that. I was one of Chris's first two graduate students, and really enjoyed that experience of kind of growing with Chris as a mentor while I was doing my PhD with him. So my PhD involved material design, synthesis, particle design and synthesis for different vaccine formulations, as well as both cell work and animal work. So I kind of did a number of different things while in my PhD and gained a number of different techniques that were translatable across a number of industries. Alongside my, I guess, research during my PhD, as Leo pointed out, I was active in the bioengineering department. I tried to help out with recruitment whenever I could. I was part of BGSS, the Graduate Student Society, when I was a PhD, and led a number of different avenues that way, but one was the social events. So I tried to bring people together. I tried to make sure we had good camaraderie within the department. And I think that those are some of the intangible skills that places like Maryland helped foster that we were able to then bring to other places. So I finished my PhD, I guess now 2017, and I went on to do a postdoc at Johns Hopkins. I'd like to interlude here. I have a wife and now a kid, but that was all part of kind of the reason why I stayed fairly local by going to Hopkins. My wife was finishing up a PhD program and had 2 to 3 years left, and I knew I wanted to do about a 2 to 3 year postdoc. So I went into my postdoc search knowing that was my time frame and what I wanted to do, and look for a good fit. And that's where I ended up working with Jennifer Lisief and Drew Partle at Johns Hopkins, right in downtown Baltimore. I spent 3 years there. I worked on a system where I was trying to understand the heterogeneity of cells, so what the different cell types were and how they changed in response to tissue injury, and then relating that towards cancer models. So I did this with a lot of high throughput analysis, a lot of different techniques that use kind of high-end sequencing and things of that nature. So I gained kind of a new experience by having some of these next generation techniques. And ultimately, like Leo said, the pandemic hit. Unfortunately for me, it aligned exactly with the time when my wife was finishing up her degree and her match program was happening. So she ended up matching right outside of Philadelphia at a hospital called AI DuPont in Delaware. So we knew we were going to be moving towards the Philadelphia, Wilmington, Delaware area. And in July of 2020, we made the move and we moved up to Philadelphia. So those last few months, kind of right as the pandemic hit and I was transitioning and we knew we were moving, I started looking for positions. And during my time as a postdoc, I kind of made the decision that I wanted to step away from academia. I had for most of my life thought I was going to be there for all of my life, and you know, had come to a couple different conclusions. One was I wanted to have a little bit more work-life balance than what I saw I could have as a professor, and I thought biotech would be a good place for that. So I started looking around at both small biotechs like where I'm at, Interius BioTherapeutics Inc., and large, pharmaceutical companies like Merck. Ultimately ended up here and got to start basically as employee number one of a brand new company in July of 2020. So had a number of different things we can go and talk about, but had a number of different experiences kind of being the first employee and starting a company from kind of the ground up during a pandemic. But ultimately now have watched the company grow a little bit larger and had experience mentoring a number of people now, either through my PhD postdoc and then the position in now where I'm a senior scientist here. So it's been a wild ride, and I'm always happy to share any and all things.
Thank you very much. I definitely think we'll be coming back to some of your story. Starting in being employee number one for a new company. Pandemic sounds like you have a lot to say. And Katherine, I'd love to hear your story. Tell us a little bit more about your career story.
Oh, for sure. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Excellent. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I'm glad I can tag team on some of what Leo and Jim have said. And so I'm actually from Maryland. So I was raised in Heavy Grace, Maryland, right at the top of the Chesapeake Bay, where the Chesapeake Bay and the Susquehanna River meet. There's a little small town where I was raised. And so I left there, went to college, and was to College of Notre Dame. And similar to Jim, the summer after my freshman year in undergrad, I've been doing research, and I basically haven't left the lab since. I am still currently in the lab right now. It's been a great career. I have a bachelor's in biology, actually. So many PhDs or kind of first year scientists, I thought I was going to med school, and then quickly realized I didn't like hospitals. So did a rotation volunteer thing, and I was like, these places are not for me. And then kept with the biomedical research route. At the end of my one of my last internships in undergrad was actually at the Army Research Lab, focusing on nanomaterials for weapons development, but I didn't really enjoy that concept of weapons development. So I looked to do nanomaterials for biomedical applications, and landed me in grad school at the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy. And there I focused on soft materials for drug delivery, tissue engineering, polymers, just kind of the gauntlet of those things. And then after grad school, I took a little bit different career route. I decided to become a K-12 school teacher. I have a real interest in that's the kind of I can definitely answer more questions about that in K-12 education, specifically science education for underperforming schools. How do we get kids from kids who love science to scientists? And I think that it's like a larger question that maybe the scientific community could help with more. And so that experience was really great. Gave me a lot of kind of perspective, and also a lot more of the soft skills, I think, that I did not acquire quite in graduate school. If you can present science to a room full of teenagers, you can really present it to about anyone. So that's been super helpful. So always planned to come back to do a postdoc, and did not anticipate staying in the area, but landed in the Department of Bioengineering with Greg Duncan. And I'm just finishing up that postdoc, and I have accepted a position as a scientist at AstraZeneca in Gaithersburg. So I'll be transitioning into working with taking my expertise in rheology and thinking about soft materials formulation, and helping them think about how we can formulate higher concentration, more viscous biological materials. So that's kind of where I'm at. So actually, I don't even know why I'm on this panel yet, because I haven't quite started, but I will be on Monday working in a biotech company. But happy to answer any questions about my whole experience. Thank you.
You will have plenty to share with us, Katherine. I know it. We're glad you're here. At this point, we'll open up Q&A. I can certainly ask some questions, but I know that we have attendees that I'm sure have questions. So as you feel comfortable, you can either put a question in the chat, or if you would like to either raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask a question out loud to our panelists, that would be great.
Congrats, Katherine, on the position and securing your next step.
Oh, thank you all. Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right, I'm gonna ask a question just so that way our attendees can think. Oh, nope, just kidding. Ashley just put one in there, and I'm gonna read Ashley's question. We'll come back to it. I'll hold on to it. But any recommendations on the best resources for finding a job in the biotech industry? And then whoever wants to take that first can.
I mean, I'm happy to jump in and share kind of my experience as I went about it. Things like this are helpful. Networking, I would say, is one of the biggest things that can help you find your next position. Whatever that position is, a postdoc, or in my case, the biotech industry. Actually, in both of my situations, going from my PhD to my postdoc, and then from my postdoc to my first position here outside of that at Interius, my PhD advisor, Chris Jewell, was the ultimate connection that put me in touch with someone that landed me in the position. So I would say stress those networks, reach out to people, see what they're doing, how they're doing it. I've also used a number of the online sites and this and that, and applying kind of cold, but the end of the day, getting the foot in the door is half the battle. Being able to talk to someone was one of the best things I was able to learn. And on top of that, what I was told was, once you do talk to someone face to face on Zoom, on a call, maybe even if they can't help you, ask if they know anyone else that can, and just keep that chain going.
I'd like to share that my experience applying to jobs, going out of grad school was 180 from applying to jobs as a postdoc. So I had applied to, I don't know, over 75 jobs as a PhD student my last semester with absolutely zero success. I was mentioning my frustration with a friend who at the time was a postdoc at NIST, and he was the one who put me in connection with the lab that was hiring at NIST. So that's kind of how I got my postdoc. As a postdoc, basically 2 months in, I've always been decently active on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn has a bunch of really cool hidden features where you can make yourself available to conversations and open to opportunities to recruiters. And I guess I had that activated, and basically 2 months into my postdoc, I would get like a weekly or bi-monthly invitation to talk to some recruiter at a company. And that pretty much kept happening. And until I felt like I was ready to have a conversation with somebody or an opportunity was good, then that's kind of how I went about, searching for jobs. I guess I really wasn't searching. They were just kind of coming to me, which is nice. But all of the serious positions that I was a finalist for, they were all from a recruiter reaching out to me, not the other way around. And I agree with Jim, network 100%.
Totally agree. Just with the networking, I think also it took me some time to really figure out where to network to, if that makes sense. I don't have any like some experience with the biotech industry, but once you it does take a little while to navigate to, think about the size of the company you're looking for, or the kind of role you want to have, or the kind of even getting a role that you can specifically grow in. So I think that all that takes a lot of networking and putting the pieces together, and you might not get it right, but trying to convince people of why you want to do a specific job is always something that takes a little bit of thought. So give yourself a lot of time.
So in transferring from a postdoc position to an industry position, did you all have to do anything to prepare yourself to take one of those industry positions, or do you feel like you obtained all of the skills that you needed to really be out there on the job market?
I can go first just because I'm probably the freshest on that transition. I felt the school, Maryland, has so much great programming and resources to help kind of get your package together as far as, whatever resume and things you need. But I found it, the one thing I really had to prepare for was the technical interview portion of the jobs I've applied for, and not in the changing the style of presentation a bit. So an academic presentation is really great, and some places really want to see your deep technical work, but I did have to kind of work on transitioning why this incredible technical thing I know would support their industry. And that took me some networking and just talking, and even with my advisor, I think it was something I had to do kind of on my own, and like really understanding where this technical expertise would translate was something I had to work on that I didn't initially, but then once I got some advice, changed kind of my landscape.
Thank you.
We have a question in the chat. This person's a first-year PhD student. Thanks for being here. Thanks for asking a question. What specific qualities should they or others start developing now to make themselves more competitive in the industry?
I'm happy to jump in on that. I think there's a number of things, you know, as a PhD student, you're going to become the expert in your field. So there's going to be techniques scientifically that you're going to have that you're going to be able to bring to a company. That's a standard. I think expanding on those, seeing how many new techniques you can get in a PhD and how many different areas you can step into, just broadens the number of positions you could apply for. While every job, you know, listing might say we want to have this technique, this technique, this technique, at the end of the day, if you have 2 of 3 or 1 of 3 or whatever it is, sometimes they're happy just to have that and you be an expert at that. So if you can diversify what you have to offer, it diversifies the number of places that you probably are competitive for. I would say along with that, diversifying the way that you develop yourself, not just with the scientific techniques, whether that's networking, you know, presentations, finding a way to sell yourself or sell the techniques that you know. I would say working on that throughout your PhD is important. You know, explaining the data as data is fine, but explaining how your data can relate to what they might be doing, like Katherine was saying, it is highly important in a way that you can sell yourself to others. That really helps.
Also, I'd recommend looking into positions early on to understand how biotech is kind of split up in a company. So there are people who do hard science research, kind of similar to what you do in grad school. You're trying to figure out some underlying mechanism or looking at cell biology, whatever it may be. But then if you're looking at a company, like a big pharma company, for example, like AstraZeneca, they have a formulation scientist who's just looking at formulations. You then have, you know, cell processing scientists. They also have people who are upstream and downstream, and they all do different things. And you may have skills for some of those positions, but you may be interested in something else. So understanding, I think early on, oh, my background is going to be more, for example, for me, it was more polymer science, material science. How would I fit in the biotech industry? What skills do I need to get before I start applying? Having at least understanding the landscape before you get to the end of the road is a good idea.
So I had a question about something I hear about working outside of academia a lot, which is if you work outside of academia, you have less freedom or less creativity to work on a particular project. So I was wondering if you felt like that was true and whether or not that was actually a problem for you or not.
I don't think that's true. I mean, I think there are restrictions, like if there's a deadline and you just need to get one result, maybe you really want to get the next step down the line in that experiment or hypothesis answer, other things that are in your head. You have priorities, right? At the end of the day, this is all a business and you need to, you know, you need to deliver on whatever your job is. I have found that I have way more resources available to me than I ever have. And I can do experiments that would be intellectually very stimulating to me. I just know that I have my priorities first. And if I want to do the cool experiment to gain an understanding maybe a month later than I would like, then that's just how it is. But I don't think that that's true at all.
Yeah, if I can jump in on that too. I mean, I think Leo's a bigger company than I am. My company started off with 1 scientist, and now I think we're like 4 to 6. So as far as, you know, diversity of research and being unique and innovative in what we're doing it every day. Like it's just us coming up with new ideas. I know a lot of people say that you can't be creative in a job position because academia, you can write whatever grant you want as long as you're funded, you can get it done. I don't think that's necessarily the case. You don't see people necessarily completely shift fields that often in academia. I would say maybe once a career you see someone shift, and it's not usually a complete 180. It's more of a, you know, right or left turn kind of thing. So you know, you might shift from one company to another in your career and thus gain some more ideas of, oh, I loved being in process development, but now I want to be on the discovery research side because I want to do some of those innovative, you know, breaking edge experiments. And then you're still going to have your input into what happens. And I think that can be found in the biotech industry just as well as in academia.
I guess my experience is just being recently on the market. I haven't had, I've asked a few places about publishing and just being active, and they all are really receptive to it. A lot of groups, just thinking about the couple places, are very open to publishing. I think one way, if you're going from PhD to post or PhD looking for industry, I think industry postdocs are really a great intermediate to to get in the lab and do some really innovative things with all the resources that are available. And the expectation of those postdocs is to publish and publish pretty robustly. So, you know, if that could be like a great way to keep your publication track up, but get a taste of what the environment's like.
Great, thank you.
Okay, do biotech companies easily sponsor work visas if a candidate is suitable for a required role? Do you have any experience with that, or have you heard or have some knowledge to that area?
I think it highly depends on the company. And when I worked at a nonprofit, certain PIs had grants that allowed for it, others did not. I think it's just very variable. Bigger companies have more resources. That's a good way to look at it. And they probably will be able to sponsor. But smaller companies, it's a little harder to come by.
I completely agree that it's case by case basis. Sometimes it's the person, right? If the person is that good, somebody will be like, well, we got to figure out how to sponsor somebody, and you can make it happen. Like Leo said, in a smaller company, you may not have that established already, so it would take kind of the ball rolling for someone. But the larger companies, the big pharmaceutical companies, all have that mechanism already in place. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. It just depends on the position and who you are and where you end up landing.
I'm just going to add, I think that those are some really good points, and it can, size of the company, or do you perfectly fit a role and a need that they have, I think are important to think about. I also think and want to, highlight the fact that this is why networking is even more important if you know that you're going to need sponsorship, because if you can find someone who takes interest in you and your skill set, they're going to fight harder for you than if you are some person that they don't know who's applying to a position posted online. Like if there's a person who knows you beforehand and wants you on their team and wants your skill set, I think it's going to be a little easier to have someone, in your corner fighting for that. Okay, I'm going to give people the time to think about some more questions. One that I want to kind of touch on, and we've touched on it a little bit already, the idea of moving from academia to industry. Some people mentioned that they knew they wanted to do it. Some, it was something that they kind of found along the way. How did it feel? Like I've heard, I don't work with as many doctoral students as my colleague, Dr. Susan Martin does, but over the years, I've definitely heard of some students that were a little concerned because they've been in academia for so long. And so making that switch is a little scary, or they aren't sure if they'll get the support from their advisor or their PI. How was that switch for you? Are there things that helped make that switch easier, or advice that you would give to someone who get into industry and leaving academia?
I think that I totally agree with you. I've hear that a lot. And I'll just share a story to maybe illustrate where I'm coming from. I had a run-in with Dean Pines, who's President Pines now. We have a snack counter in our department, and he was buying a bag of chips, and he said, "Hey, you're the president's postdoc. What are you going to do next?" And I said, "Well, Dean Pines, I don't know. Like, I don't know academia or industry." And he was like, "Well, do whatever you want." And I actually have never done a postdoc, and I became the chair, the department chair of aerospace engineering, and later to the president of Maryland. So he really emphasized to me at that moment that, like, whatever you do, if just stay current with the research, stay active in your community, and you never really have to close the door to academia. So that's that kind of has been my perspective over this transition period, and it's changed. It has been kind of it's changed my thought process, that conversation, because I feel like for a long time that idea of the transition has been like, how do I prepare for it? But really, it's like I haven't experienced yet, but just being active and scientific and knowing what you're doing is kind of one key to the transition. Leo and Jim might have more to say.
As far as the transition goes, I would say if you're at a decent company, they don't want you there past working hours, right? They want you to be there for your 8 or 9 hours or whatever your contract says. Be efficient. They don't want you going off for hour-long coffee sessions or hanging out with friends, go to the pub and then go back to, they don't want that, right? They want people to just be as efficient as possible and then go home, because people deserve to have lives. And so the big shift for me, even as a postdoc, because of the way my company was structured, they didn't want me there, running 18-hour time points, because that wouldn't allow me to be in the lab, or that would force me to work more than my 40 hours. And so adjusting to hey, let's be efficient and not waste time. I'm not saying that grad students waste time, but I think being a grad student, time is kind of like this weird construct. And if you want to be in the lab until midnight, you can. And maybe some advisors even push for that. And in industry, it's very, very different. In my current role, I have been very surprised with how many interesting projects I get, and all of these priorities that are now on my plate. But I still need to be efficient and not be here past a certain time point, because that's not the point of what I'm doing. So adjusting that time, that mindset of, hey, this isn't my life necessarily. I can do other things after 6 p.m. Jim has a family. I have a daughter on the way. I know for a fact, I'm here to do my job and then I go home. That's, I think, for me, has been the biggest surprise and shift that I've had to take.
Yeah. I would say my transition from academia to industry was refreshing. I had been in academia. I worked my butt off a lot. The pandemic hit, I had a kid, and I realized my priorities weren't to be in the lab for so many hours doing things that maybe weren't, in my mind, pushing towards a final product, something that would ultimately help somebody. So that was one of the reasons why I made the shift to industry, was that I felt like I had a better opportunity to do research and create a product that would help someone, and also have a better work-life balance. I always stress that, even in my time as a PhD student and as a postdoc, and I went on numerous trips and did different things and always tried to be as efficient as I could. And now when you go to industry, that's basically what people do, right? They work as hard as they can for the time they're supposed to. The time of the pandemic is a little bit harder to hang out after work, but people go home and do what they have to, and they have a life outside of work, and they have different hobbies and activities or families. And I think depending on where you go, some places may promote it more than others, but people I've talked to has been promoted in their company, and they're supported in doing that. And that was refreshing, because not everywhere is that always supported. I felt like Maryland did a good job supporting me, but it's not always the case. So finding that good fit. Maybe you want to be in the lab 20 hours a day. That might not be at every role. Maybe you only want to work 8 to 9 hours a day, but work your butt off during that. You can find the roles that fit what you're looking for. And I think either in academia or in biotech, you just have to know what you're looking for.
I really appreciate this question and your responses, especially because I'm in this transitional period, and I've gotten advice from advisors saying that once you leave academia, basically you're closing the door behind you, and that it's really hard to go back if you decide to venture off into industry. But I really do appreciate each of you, each of your stories, especially you, Katherine, and just following what you're passionate about and teaching. I think that that's amazing. So thank you guys.
Just a reminder, if you have questions, feel free to unmute and ask, or if you would rather throw it in the chat and have me read it off, that's great too. Otherwise, you have to listen to them answer my questions.
I have another question.
Great.
So something I've heard about looking for jobs in general is you should have an idea of what salary you should be looking for. And as someone in academia, I feel like I wouldn't know what an appropriate thing would be to ask. So do you have any tips for like researching what an appropriate salary would be to ask for particular roles or even at certain companies?
Katherine, how did you do it since you just got your job?
Yeah, I would say that that's yeah, that was a question I did not know. I was how do I say? I networked a lot and had like someone literally who I knew who worked with the company on text with me while I was, emailing back and forth with, hey, they offered me this figure with this bonus and this days off, like, and they were like, no, actually, like ask for more. Everyone always says ask for more. And so that was basically how I got through the negotiation portion, was just like having someone who was insider. And then also like just meeting with a couple friends, who were in the area and just asking them very blank, like, what do you make? How much do you make? I think that, and that's been my approach. And basically everyone who I talked to or connected with who was at the same phase as me, like if you're talking to someone above you, they might not really know, I don't know, but they were really pretty transparent. And yeah, I'm happy to answer those questions maybe offline or whatever. And I think each company is different. I would say that what you can get at a larger pharmaceutical company might not be the same at a smaller company, but the reward system might be better at a smaller company. So that's what I've noticed.
Yeah, Glassdoor is really great.
Mm.
Yeah, that's how Glassdoor. That's what I recommend for salary.
Yeah, I was going to mention, I think LinkedIn every once in a while will show you like a range of salaries for similar positions as well. Talking to people, if you know someone in a similar position, in a similar role, you can get some ballpark. And I think to piggyback on what Katherine was saying, sometimes you need to balance, let's say the overall package compared to what the dollar amount is. So you can at a smaller company maybe get stock options. You might get some stock options at a large pharmaceutical company, but that might be a different percentage or a different amount you would get. There might be other benefits, retirement, 401k style things, or health insurance, or not, or there's a stipend to do that. So you have to kind of balance some of that with what the offer says as far as your salary or bonus. And I think to Katherine's point, there's a negotiation phase. They give you a paper, and that doesn't mean that's the only thing they're willing to give you. So usually you would want to ask for a little bit more, or ask for what they can do, and maybe have a point that you want to negotiate hard on, and it's a non-starter. For me, I was moving from Maryland to Philadelphia, and I was like, well, I would like to have some form of like moving bonus, some upfront money, because I would like to, defer the cost of my moving, right? And the base salary, whatever that is, maybe that's okay. You don't need to combat that, but you can always find some aspect of the contract that maybe you want to negotiate on. And I wouldn't ask for the world, but you can ask for a couple things and hope you can get one or two.
On that note, maybe a question for both Katherine and Jim. would you agree that if you're going to negotiate and ask for more, you shouldn't ask for just a little more?
Mm,
Like, for example, every company for a position, they have a range that they can offer. They have
right.
a set budget. And so let's say you really want, you want the six figures, you want 100,000, right? And they offer you 95. Personally, I would not ask for 5 grand more because you're hassling for such a small amount. At that point, if you really want to ask for more, ask for more. Ask for, 105, 110, because that's a much bigger jump from the salary that they offered. So just keep that in mind, because I think some HR representatives might see that as kind of petty if you're only asking for just a little bit
Mm.
more. Um, just my 10 cents, but I'm interested in your opinion.
I would agree. I've heard the like 10% number float around a lot, right? If you're wanting to ask for more, make it like 10%, right? If you're at 100, ask for 110. If they meet you in the middle, you make your 5K, right? But if you're asking for another $1,000, it's like, after taxes, how much are you really bringing home per month that is worth it, right? So you want to balance that. To my point on, you can negotiate on multiple points. If they're $20,000 off the mark of where you think they should be, and that's where you want, maybe you ask for that 20,000, but then you don't tell them, I also want, 50% more stock, and I want to get an extra week off a year, right? Or you're like, my number looks okay, but they only give me 7 days off a year. I'd really love to have an extra week off if that's okay, and see how that balances out. So, I think you have to be thoughtful of what you ask for to make sure, like Leo said, it's not just a petty nothing, but also balance that between you can't ask for everything all at once.
Definitely. I think that I think I sat through a career center negotiating Zoom, and the thing I noticed is you want to negotiate for something like I need, like, I guess my current one was, I'm not moving, so that's like I'm not getting that moving expenses, and then the Glassdoor average is this, plus I have 3 years of postdoc experience at this level, and so I want to be at the higher end of this range, for that scientist position. So I think that was, you want to kind of present your case, and how strong your case is, relative, but definitely come to the HR people with some points of, these are the 3 reasons why, or one reason. I agree with Jim, just not, hey, can you do better, $1,000 better? Like, okay, that's a little bit different. I think that, be really intentional. It's not, it's just a very intentional process. No one's really out to get you. I mean, of some larger companies, the HR people want to save money, but for smaller companies, it's about getting the right people in the right place. So that's the goal, is for you to get to the right place and for them to get the right person. So.
And just one point, if you go through a contracting agency like Aerotech, for example, sometimes Aerotech will find full-time positions at companies. So you're not getting recruited by Aerotech, it's the actual company. That's how I got my job. Aerotech benefits if you get the highest salary possible, because then they get paid more. So I do recommend going through those avenues as well, because sometimes you just get offered a better number without you having to try.
Nice.
I think these are all really good points. And I like that some of you even talked about like looking at the full package, because maybe there is an organization that can't quite meet that salary goal, but they're willing to give you an extra week of vacation a year, and that might make it worth it. Or they can give you the moving expenses, and so that won't be a charge that they have to incur every year, but it helps you with that initial thing. So I like that you brought all those up. Thank you very much. A lot of you have also talked about networking, and in different ways, whether that was LinkedIn, reaching out to people you knew at organizations. What are some networking opportunities that maybe PhD students don't normally think about, that maybe you've either experienced or you've heard of, or things that you want to make sure people know, like have conferences been especially helpful in your networking, or is that more so for academia? What have been some of your best networking opportunities?
My best networking opportunity has been going to Looney's and talking to Jim and people like Jim. I'm being completely serious. Like all of the opportunities that have ever come my way, they were from people that I was friends with, that I developed relationship. Maybe one person was teaching me how to use an instrument, and I just continued cultivating that experience. Um, that's really how I've gained mentors and friends. Is just chatting with people and remembering that they're people and not just someone to help me, has been useful. But no.
I mean, I've had a number of times at Looney's with a number of different people, Leo included. I think that definitely helps to have some personal basis, right? Get out of the lab and just talk to people as people, but also realize that just because you haven't talked to them in a little while doesn't mean they're not willing to talk. I am always open to talk to people, and having never met some of you or having met people and just been busy. So if people reach out, the fear of cold calling can be hard. But if you have some connection through somewhere and you can say, hey, we both shared the same mentor and I would love to hear about your experiences, just having some connection and something there opens the door, I think, to a lot of people. And most people are willing to help because somebody helped them along the way too.
Definitely. I think, yeah, this most recent opportunity really came from a friend from grad school, right? So just I was in grad school many years ago, but I think that's it. And in the in the COVID age of networking, I would say LinkedIn has been my biggest networking tool. Just asking for people for a 15-minute Zoom conversation or whatever has been really helpful. I think Leo mentioned it earlier, like there's a lot of new features on LinkedIn that are super helpful.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from attendees? What's your opinion on moving to industry after a PhD without doing a postdoc?
I'm happy to jump in here to start. I think it's completely feasible. I think depending on what you want to do, if you know you don't like academia, why not, right? Get into industry first. I think it was Daphne or someone had said that you feel like the door is closing behind you when you leave academia. I wouldn't necessarily say that's the case. I think some people like the industry style more, and once they leave, they don't want to go back to what they were doing in academia. So if you know that from the PhD, fine. But I think you have to be realistic about the type of position that you're able to get with that amount of experience. A lot of people want either a specific technique or a certain amount of time just to show that you've been able to do multiple projects and interact on multiple levels with multiple mentors. So I think just understanding where that position might be it is important so that you're not overreaching and thus getting rejected from a number of different positions if your skill set doesn't match really what they were looking for.
I agree. Don't do a postdoc if you don't want to do a postdoc. There's no reason to do it.
Or do the industry one that Katherine said. That's a great idea to get your foot in the door and get the industry experience.
On that note, there are structured postdoc programs at companies. One of our colleagues, also from bioengineering there at University of Maryland, she went off to Novartis, and it's a very structured postdoc where it's tailored to your personal goals. So hers is not tied towards publishing or anything like that, and she's being exposed to the business side of science, which is really cool. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can also do that.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask you, so how do we get into the business side of the science?
You either do what Jim did, which is go to a small company and you get to wear a lot of hats, and then eventually the opportunity comes up where you integrate yourself into the business side of things. I think traditionally, if you started a company that's a little more developed, you would begin as either, depending on your background, engineer or scientist. You kind of work your way towards a managerial position. And then that's how you start getting acquainted with the business side of science. Some companies require MBAs to become director or whatever. The ones that I've interacted with mostly don't. But you kind of have to work your way up that ladder and then transition over to business.
Yep, I would definitely agree. I think that there's a number of positions out there also that kind of can be a little bit of both, right? You might be able to find ones that are postdocs that allow you to transition and get some of that business experience. You might be able to, going into it, know you might not be doing that much bench science, but you're doing some more project management. I think that getting into those roles might be tough straight out of a PhD, but trying to show that you have some experience in managing a team, like you say, working up that ladder. If you can skip a few rungs, you might be able to do that, but that's the general gist of it. Is if you're at a big company, you got to work your way up. If you're at a smaller company, you can kind of grow with it, and depending on what happens, you might find you love a certain role and you're good at it, and they think you are too, and they don't have to look for anybody, and everybody enjoys that. So I know we don't have a ton of time left, but one point to that is if you enjoy something, like Katherine was saying about, you want to do a postdoc, or if you love academia or love industry, there's things out there for you. So I would I've been through enough positions now that do ones that make you happy. It goes a long way.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I definitely agree. I think I think our postdoc, we want to go into it, if you want to do one, to think about what training you want to get and why you want to do it. So if there's something, if you don't want to do it, don't, if you don't need the training, then don't do the postdoc. So I think that that's like a big thing.
So we have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask one more question, but I do want to take the time to let those of you know that the next session will start at 2:30. It's another session of alumni panels. And Veronica's going to stick a couple of links in the chat too. Just want to make sure you catch it before I ask that last question. But there is a link to DocNet, which is a group on Terrapins Connect where you can network with other doctoral alumni. So that's a really great resource, as well as a link to the evaluation. So if you would take a moment, I filled the evaluation for this session. But to kind of finish this off, I'm going to come back to our panelists and ask either to share what do you think your biggest piece of career advice is, or what piece of information were you hoping to impart on those watching today that we didn't get to. Take a minute or two to kind of tell us what you think that biggest piece, or that piece you didn't get to tell us about yet today that you want to make sure we know.
All right, I'll go first. I think I kind of got to it, so I can get to it quickly, is to do what makes you happy. At the end of the day, if you're finishing a PhD, you have a terminal degree, right? You can kind of step away from a postdoc almost whenever you want. You can shift from one position to another after that when you want. You're not forced to wait for someone to sign that diploma. So, PhD can be difficult, academia can be difficult, industry can be difficult, but if you find something you love to do, or that you don't love doing something, you want to find something new, I would say, take that step, take that leap. Everyone's got a good education behind them, and they can find a way to make it work. So that would be my suggestion. Don't get stuck somewhere you don't like being.
A quick story. As a grad student, I collaborated with someone at Shady Grove, a professor, and he told me this piece of advice that really stuck with me as a postdoc, which was, and it goes along with what Jim just said, as a grad student, if the grad student is majorly failing and trying really hard, then it's the responsibility of the advisor to ensure that success somehow happens for that grad student. Once you're out, if you're failing and you're not transitioning, or you're not liking your job, or whatever it may be, and you have complete control of it and you're not changing something, then that's on you. So just like Jim said, you're not waiting on your degree to be signed off by somebody. Now you're in complete control of your life. Do whatever makes you happy. Remember, you're not owned by the machine after you graduate.
Yeah, I double down on both of them. Just be happy, be genuine, bring your full self to whatever you do. And that's always worked for me. And I think that that's like the biggest thing. Just like, just be genuine, what you need, what you want, what you like to do.
Wonderful. I think that's great advice to end on. Thank you so much, Jim, Katherine, Leo. I hope that my fellow attendees will join me in a virtual round of applause. You guys were wonderful. Thank you to everyone who came to watch and who asked questions and helped to make this session better by asking those great questions. But thank you everyone who was here. Again, fill out the evaluation if you have a moment, and get connected to DocNet through Terrapins Connect, where you can network with other doctoral alumni. But have a great day and enjoy the rest of the sessions.
Well, thanks everybody, and feel free to reach out if you want.
Take care, everyone.
Yeah.